parks mean. The other thing we're looking at is how many times do people draw other people in nature, or is it separate or part? There's just a whole lot of interesting kinds of aspects with this in terms of trying to understand a little bit more about where people are in terms of some of their understanding of these kinds of things. Okay. Well, it also raises some questions about intelligence, and Loeb talks about this in his book, and I really think it's kind of interesting. He suggests that that people have said basically there's 7 types of intelligences that kids and adults should have, and these are things like you need to be word smart, know how to use words, numbers or reasoning smart, spatial smart and picture smart, understanding how those kinds of things work. Body smart, understanding the relationship of your body to the world. Music smart, people smart, people relations, those kinds of things. Self smart, knowing something about who you are. And Loeb suggests we also need to be nature smart. And so that may be, again, something else that's missing in our society that may help to make all these other kinds of things more significant as well. Well, one of the big questions that a number of people raised is if people are no longer connected to nature like they used to be, and especially if children aren't connected, where will future environmentalists come from? Who is going to be concerned about the issues that surround our Earth? And I'm sure you're all familiar with Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth and the global warming and all those kinds of issues that exist. And I mean, that's absolutely critical that we think about that. Although the discussion of many of those issues related to climate change and global warming and the inconvenient truth it talks about it from an environmental kind of global perspective, but doesn't necessarily look at it from a connection to nature perspective. Whereas Loeb's looking at it from a connection to nature's perspective, but not the other. And I'd like to contend we got to look at both. And I also think we look at both because the things that relate to us as individuals in our connection to nature as individuals is one aspect, but there's also this much broader public health community kind of connection as well. There's a thing that ACA, American Camp Association, has started, and you probably can't all read this, but it's a pledge for green spoken here, and it's an attempt to try to get families and children, camps and so on, to think much more about the environment. And I kind of like the notion of some of these ideas here because they do start to blend together the ideas that are challenges to environmentalists and having a community that's environmentally conscious, and also they tend to blend the kinds of things that we do as individuals. And I think that's the kind of joint way that would be really important to think about how we get kids more connected, not abstractly, but in a local way as it's connected to a much broader kind of community. So this is just one example. There are many examples of this kind of thing going on. And I also raised the question then, does connecting people to nature come before environmental ethics concerns or vice versa? And again, I don't like either or things, so I don't think it's either or, but I think they come together. I think the more connections we have with nature, the more likely we are to be concerned about broader environmental issues. And being concerned about environmental issues doesn't have the same meaning unless we also have a personal connection to nature. One of the interesting things, there actually happened to be in USA Today, the thing in the corner about youth's concerns, and it says American kids were asked if they could change one thing about the world, what would it be? And 44% said they would save the environment and protect animals. That was the number one thing that they said. So that's kind of encouraging, but again, thinking about what all this kind of connection might mean. So how do we connect children and others to nature? Just to kind of summarize here, we recognize it's a twofold problem in terms of nature detachment and not being connected, and also the environmental crisis in which we are currently living. There's a lot of things going on in society, a lot of organizations. The Children in Nature Network is one that Richard Loeb has gotten underway. There's many, many partners involved with that. Many organizations like the American Camp Association, National Recreation Park Association, National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, all those organizations have come together to look at some of those kinds of things. There certainly is a lot more attention in the media to these, which is all very, very heartening. Youth organizations and various kinds of things. The legislation that's trying to be, that some people are trying to push in Congress, we have the No Child Left Behind, but they're trying to get a No Child Left Inside Act, which would encourage more environmental education and more kinds of opportunities like that through schools. And I certainly hope that that's an area where youth organizations and parks and recreation and groups like that could also be very, very involved with that movement of leaving no child inside. Well, I think for a lot of these things, it comes down to a personal commitment. That's where it starts. Be the change that you want to see. The idea that Gandhi talks about. And so there's lots of different things we can do as individuals that will help to make our lives more connected with nature. At the same time, hopefully providing some ways that we can do something about the environmental crisis. So reconnecting with places. Lots of times when I think about a special place that really was important to me, I realize I haven't been there for a long time. I need to personally, reconnect with that. Just sit under a tree. And again, you've got beautiful places here on campus. Put nature in your life. Plants, pets, whatever it happens to be, and many of you may do that. But it's pretty amazing how planting flowers or having a plant or any of these kinds of things help, again, to recognize the interdependence that we have with other things. Making professional connections. Again, lots of organizations are involved in the green movement and this type of thing. Thinking green, whatever that happens to be. And again, that's a whole nother lecture. Take a bus. There's just a whole variety of things. I had decided for my own commitment this year that I was going to take a bus at least one day a week to work. And I live 22 miles from where I work, and fortunately there is a bus service, and it's actually free to NC State employees. I have to make a connection change halfway, but it's pretty much an express kind of bus. But I cannot tell you how many times I have been the only person on that bus. It's really pretty frightening to recognize that we have this wonderful free opportunity, and people aren't taking advantage of it. It takes me twice as long to get to work. That's the downside. But then I also have an entire hour to read or do whatever I want to do without having to deal with, who's cutting me off on the interstate. But these are just all examples, and everybody has to make their own kinds of personal commitments if this is something that is important to you and that is important. So just in closing, I would like to suggest that nature deficit order is not just for children, it's for all of us. And that we probably should go outside and play, although it may be thundering or lightning or tornadoes or whatever out there right now. But and instead of standing around here talking about it, but nevertheless, talking about it may prepare us for something else. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight, and thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions? Like that.
How do we address issues related to time pressure? I mean, over and over we hear things about all these health behaviors, whether it's connection to nature, exercise, healthy diet, but they're time inefficient. And as we do more, we do more, and we do more. You can't improve the experience of nature through goods or speeding it up. I mean, how do we push back against that?
I think that's a really good question, and if I had the answer, I probably would be somewhere else right now than right here. But I think it's also about the kinds of priorities we set in our lives, and this is really important to be in nature or to be physically active or whatever it happens to be. I think we can figure out some ways to do it. I like to use the analogy that whenever you get a paycheck, if you don't put some in the savings right away, you're probably going to spend the whole paycheck. Same is true with doing some of these kinds of things. If you don't plan to spend some time outdoors, if you don't plan to spend some time doing something physically active, it's probably not going to happen during the day, because there's just simply too many pulls on our time and effort. And so I think it becomes that. Now, that's really easy to say and much more difficult to do. But if it's important, I think we can figure out ways to do some of these kinds of things. It's a matter of priorities as much as anything. We all have exactly the same amount of time every day. So we just have to figure out how we might want to use that. And I realize that some people have situations in their life that are very, very difficult to find time for themselves. But I think it's possible if it's a priority, and that's where it's kind of got to be. I also argue that people do things in their life that they enjoy doing, and so I think particularly the thing I've always loved about being in this profession of